Okay. Well, looks like we got some more coming. Okay, I'm Lynn Crawford, and so glad that y'all are attending today. And I need to warn y'all that I don't do really well presenting in front of groups. I thought we were going to have 5 or 6. So my anxiety level's up here, and I've always had a problem. In fact, it started in elementary school, presenting things. I went to Epworth, which I'm a native Fannin County. How many know the Epworth school campus? Anybody know where the old school campus? Well, that's where my parents went there, and I went there. And so in elementary school, we had a play every year, and every year, every kid had to have some part in the play. And every year, I just really bungled the whole thing, or my part rather. And it was sort of embarrassing because my dad had 8 brothers and sisters, and so I had a lot of uncles and aunts, and they would all come. And the first year in first grade, I got up there and it was time for my part, and I just looked out into the crowd, and I was just frozen like deer in headlights, and that they were yelling at me my lines, and I saw my mom just go like this. So the second year in the second grade, I've never had a stuttering problem, but I just got up there and I just started stuttering and couldn't get anything out. So third and fourth grade, same sort of disasters. Well, the 5th grade, the teacher that did the play came to me and said, "Lynn, we think doing all these rehearsals and things are really stressing you out, and we're going to give you the shortest lines in the play this year. It's only 6 words, 6 words. And basically, when you hear the sound of the cannon, all you need to say is, 'Hark, the sound of the cannon.' And you don't have to come to rehearsals. We don't want to stress you out. Just practice that." So it was 30 days, and so every day I'd say, "Hark the sound of the cannon, hark the sound of the cannon." And so it was a week, so I do it 100 times a day or more. And then the week before, I did it 400 or 500 times. And I was really feeling confident. I thought, I'm going to nail it this year. And so the day of the play, I must have said, "Hark the sound of the cannon" 1,000 times. So we get to the play, and it comes my part, and they push me out on the stage, and there's this big kaboom, and I went, "What in the heck was that?" So anyway, you'll just have to bear with me. And again, we're surprised there's so many people. I told my wife that 40 people signed up, and she said, my wife's very encouraging. She said, "They've obviously never heard you speak." So anyway, but welcome to the first class on Science, Faith, and Evidence for God class. I'm not a scientist. Oh.
Can we pray first?
We can.
Okay.
You want to lead us?
No.
Okay, I'll pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just pray that your presence would be here, and that your Holy Spirit would minister to each one of us and help us, lead us to the truth. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I attend the Ridge, and I want to say I'm not a professor, I'm not a scientist, I'm a boring accountant. So you're probably saying, "Well, what qualifications do you have to present something like this?" Well, I have always had a skeptical mind, and I've had doubts about Christianity and God, and starting in college, really. And so this has led me to a lifelong search for answers to those questions. And so I've done a lot of reading, talked to a lot of people, I've gone to conferences, and really tried to get answers to these. So I'm hoping that my struggles with my faith will maybe help some of y'all if you've got doubts or questions. And so anyway, that's my only qualification. Paul said he was the chief sinner. I'm a chief doubter. So, but glad y'all are here. So, how many of y'all ever heard people say there's no scientific evidence for God? Anybody heard that? Yeah, most people. How many have ever heard of the four horsemen of atheism? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. Any? We got a few. Okay. Well, these guys are all prominent atheists, and I would say militant atheists, because they all came out with books about 20 years ago, about 2005, around that time. Richard Dawkins came out with a book, The God Delusion. Sam Harris, The End of Faith. Christopher Hitchens, God is Not Great. And Daniel Dennett, Breaking the Spell, basically a religion. And let me just read you a little bit of what each one of those have said. Richard Dawkins, and he's a famous Oxford University biology professor, written a lot of books on evolution and a number of books on criticizing religion, and in particular Christianity. So he's probably the most prominent atheist in the world today, I would say. He's that well known. So he said, faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is the belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Sam Harris, who wrote The End of Faith, he's an author, he's an American author, philosopher, and neuroscientist. He said, science reveals you to be a biochemical puppet. He doesn't believe in free will. He thinks we're all controlled. Come on in. So he doesn't even believe in free will. He thinks our chemical makeup controls everything about us. Christopher Hitchens, he's a well-known British author, social critic, and journalist, and he said this: I suppose that one reason I've always detested religion is its sly tendency to insinuate the idea that the universe is designed with you in mind, or even worse, there's a divine plan into which one fits, whether one knows it or not. This kind of modesty is too arrogant for me. And then Daniel Dennett, he's a philosopher, writer, and cognitive scientist, and he said this: there's simply no polite way to tell people they've dedicated their lives to an illusion. So these guys, when these books came out, they got so much press. They were in newspapers, television, interviews, all over. And they, I think, had a real impact on belief in God in the Western world. And I'd like to talk to y'all about a personal experience. My middle daughter went to Fannin High, and a book came out in 2003 called The Da Vinci Code. Anybody heard of The Da Vinci Code? Most people. And then the movie came out with Tom Hanks starring. It was a mystery thriller. But in the book, it said Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. Christians invented Jesus' deity in the 4th century. The Bible contents had been lost and tampered with. There are other Gospels that tell us the real truth about Jesus that were purposely left out of the Bible. So my daughter read this book, and she came to me, and she basically said, well, Dad, which is true, the Da Vinci Code or the Bible? And as any good, loving father would do, I said, go ask your mom. So, no, I didn't. A lot of the search, one thing I'd read a lot about was the evidence for the reliability of the New Testament documents. So I knew this was garbage. But so I went out and bought a book, The Da Vinci Code, an examination and response to its errors, written by a Christian. And he went through the actual historical evidence and pointed out the fallacies in this and the Bible, the evidence that strongly supported its reliability. Basically, a lot of the material I'm taking today is from this book, The Return of the God Hypothesis. 3 scientific discoveries that reveal the mind behind the universe. And Stephen Meyer, who wrote this book, he's the director of the Science and Culture Division of the Discovery Institute in Seattle. And it's a think tank that researches scientific evidence that points to an intelligence behind the universe. Now, it's not Christian, although a lot of the staff members are Christians, but a lot of them are scientists, and they're just trying to find evidence that points to an intelligence behind the universe. And it's a really great organization. So anyway, I'll be getting a number of the information that I'll be presenting today from him. Also, some of what I'll be talking about is anyone The Case for the Creator by Lee Strobel. Anybody read that? It basically goes over the same sort of themes in that as well. So, anyway, I want to show you a short video clip about Stephen Meyer. He's speaking at the 2023 Colson conference. It's a conference on Christian worldview. And let me set it up as he's actually talking about a conference that he spoke at like 2 or 3 years earlier, the Dallas Science and Faith Conference. And he's telling a story that happened when he was speaking 2 or 3 years earlier about a girl that was actually filming this conference. So let's start with that.
One face. Move your phone right and down.
With a story. We do a Science and Faith conference every year in Dallas, and a couple years ago we had Eric Metaxas come, and he did one of his Socrates in the City interviews with me, and it was about a book that I had yet to publish, Return of the God Hypothesis, which will provide some of the basis of my remarks tonight. But there was on the stage with us that night a young camera crew. And stage left, there was a young woman who we later learned was named Alicia. And about halfway through the interview, as I was talking about some of the scientific evidence that I'll discuss tonight that I think points very decisively to the reality of God, this young woman began to weep visibly. And people in the audience noticed there's a big crowd like tonight. And so she was understandably quite embarrassed afterwards. But she then later wrote a letter to the producer who had hired her to do the filming and told her story. And I just want to read a little bit from the letter. She said, "Throughout my college career, professors would constantly lecture that based on the evidence they had provided, there should be no way that anyone in the class could believe in God. They'd argue that the science was proven and God was hence a myth. I was not equipped to present a valid opposition in debate," she said. "I was desperate to find commonality between my belief and my scientific education, but I could find none." And so, unlike many young people that I have met, speaking on college campuses, she didn't entirely lose her faith, but she had lived for several years in a state of cognitive dissonance, thinking that the facts pointed away from God, and the internal desire she had for a relationship with God was the only thing pointing to him. And so she longed for there to be a factual basis for faith, but as she said, she could find none. Now, it's not hard to see how there...
Okay. Okay, there was a Gallup poll a few years ago that polled people on their belief in God. And so they did a poll between 2013 2017 and asked people, did they believe in God? And the general population at that point said 87% of them believed in God. And it was broken down: gender, race, ages, education, marital status, parental status. And then 5 years later, after 2017, they did the same poll. And if you look, the general population belief in God dropped 6 points. The biggest drop was in age 18 to 29 years old. It dropped 10 points. And so the Discovery Institute, Stephen Meyer's group, basically did research on why there was such a precipitous drop in belief in God. And the number one answer was there's no scientific evidence for God. The number two answer was theories of undirected evolution. And the third, the problem of pain and suffering in the world. And that was kind of surprising to me. I thought problem of pain and suffering would probably be number one. But basically it was this, no scientific evidence for God.
Then was that in the U.S.?
Yes, U.S., yes. All right, so we're going to look today at one of the major scientific discoveries in the 20th century that point directly to the God of the Bible. But I've got to give you a little history lesson. We're going to go back to 1900. Can anyone tell me what the scientific consensus of physicists at 1900 was about the universe and what brought it about? Does anyone have an idea?
The Big Bang?
No, but you're close. That's just a little bit later. But in 1900, the scientific viewpoint on the universe was it was eternal. It was static, wasn't changing. It's always been here, always will be. So if you went to Oxford University in England or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale and took a physics class, you were taught that the universe was eternal. I was really surprised when I read this. Anybody else surprised at that? Well, in 1915, 15 years after the start of the 20th century, Albert Einstein came out with his theory of general relativity. And it was a big, discovery. It was about gravitation. And in it, he basically said that it provided even more evidence that the universe was eternal. So here we are in 1915, and there's just more evidence that the universe is eternal, never had a beginning. It's always been here. So we've got a major conflict up to the mid-1920s. The science says the universe had no beginning. The Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it's really unreconcilable because it's just 180. These viewpoints are 180 degrees different. So in the science, there was an apocalypse of scientific thinking. Oops, how did I get that? Mark. Oh no, it's an apocalypse. Bart, are you wearing clean underwear? Bart, not anymore. So I'm sorry, that's not the apocalypse I was talking about.
No, it's fine.
But in 1927, a major scientific apocalypse happens. The scientific consensus theory of an eternal static universe is upended by a Belgian priest. Anyone want to guess how a Belgian priest upended this theory of an eternal universe?
You say it's light, it's not the redshift light?
That's just a little bit later. That's very close. Basically, how many think he just gave such a powerful sermon on Genesis chapter 1 that scientists changed their mind? Anybody think that? Oops. Well, Lemaitre was also a physicist, a very good physicist. So he actually took the equations that Einstein had in his general theory of relativity and worked them, and he said, well, hold it. These equations, if you work them out, show that the universe is expanding and that it had a beginning. And he basically, I think, corresponded with Einstein. And so in 1927, this was at a conference in Belgium, a physicist conference. They actually rode in a taxi together. And this is what Einstein told Lemaitre. Said, your calculations are correct, your physical insight, meaning that the universe was expanding and had a beginning, is abominable. And he accused Lemaitre of letting, you're just inspired by the Christian dogma of creation and totally unjustified from the physical or scientific point of view. So that was in 1927. 1929, in talking about redshift, Edwin Hubble, who's this great American astronomer, was working in California at the Mount Wilson Observatory, and the fires are very close to this, and they're trying to save it. And he discovered that the galaxies were moving farther apart from each other, and so showed that the universe was actually expanding. So 2 years later, Einstein in 1931 visited Edwin Hubble, and he showed him the evidence of the red shift, and I won't get into the details of that, which showed that the universe was in fact expanding. And so Einstein agreed that the scientific evidence was showing that the universe was not static, but was expanding. And then in 2000, I found this in a 2018 NBCnews.com. It said, Einstein later called the cosmological constant the greatest blunder of his life. Well, what does that mean? Well, in his equations, he fudged a value called the cosmological constant, because he should have discovered this in 1915, that the universe was expanding, but he didn't like that because of the religious philosophical thing. So he fudged his number. And Stephen Meyer in this book said, Einstein's choice of the value of the cosmological constant had no physical justification. Instead, it followed from his assumption of an eternal steady-state universe, an assumption he favored for explicitly philosophical reasons or religious reasons. With now the evidence showing that the universe had a beginning and wasn't eternal, scientists were going to have to deal with what caused the universe. And they didn't want to, because that got into theology, what caused the universe. So scientists, a lot of them didn't like this. Oops, my grandkids have gotten into my slides. Sorry about that. So many scientists fought this scientific discovery that the universe had a beginning and was expanding. The British astrophysicist Sir Arthur Eddington, who was a contemporary of Einstein, said this: philosophically, the notion of a beginning of the present order is repugnant to me. I should like to find a genuine loophole. I simply do not believe the present order of things started off with a bang. The expanding universe is preposterous. It leaves me cold. So for the next 30 years, scientists tried to come up with a better explanation. The steady-state model, the oscillating universe model, and other theories. And they did this because there was one problem with the theory of the Big Bang. It had a hole in it. And this hole was, the theory was that at one point the universe was this tiny speck, compacted at just intense pressures, and was so hot that when it finally exploded, there should have been a residue of radiation left over in the universe that you could detect. But for 30 years, scientists couldn't detect it. And so this led a real opening for the other scientists to come up with competing theories on this. Now then, hold on one second, let me. Okay, if y'all got the email that I sent yesterday, I talked about two pigeons and their poop who played a role in discovering this cosmic background radiation. So how did these two pigeons, oops, slide again. So how did two pigeons and their poop help confirm the Big Bang's cosmic background radiation that this theory had predicted? Well, we shift to 1965, and two scientists, Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias, they were working at the Bell Laboratories, and they had this big antenna that was searching the universe for various things. They weren't looking for the cosmic background radiation. And there was, their instruments had this very annoying hum on it. And they couldn't, it was just very annoying, so they said, let's get rid of it, let's find out what's causing it and get rid of it. So they thought, well, maybe this was near New York City, that New York City was emitting some sort of something that was affecting their instruments and causing this hum. Well, they checked that out, wasn't the cause. Well, there'd been some atomic testing years earlier, and they thought, well, maybe we're picking up radiation from that, and it's affecting our instruments and this hum. They checked that out, that didn't pan out. So they found there were two pigeons that had nested in this antenna and had pooped all over the place. So they thought, well, maybe that's what's causing this hum. So they got up there and cleaned it out, and voila, the hum was still there. So they then realized that this was the cosmic background radiation that Big Bang Theory had basically said was there, and they confirmed it. So this really kind of put a nail into all the other theories out there about the universe. And after 1965, there were additional discoveries that confirmed the Big Bang, if you will, and so it's sort of it is the scientific consensus that the universe had a beginning. So here's a slide we looked at early on in the 1920s. We had this conflict. Science said the universe had no beginning. The Bible said the universe had a beginning, and what turned out to be correct? The Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It had a starting point. So with the scientific discoveries of the last 100 years, science comes kicking and screaming to what the Bible had said for thousands of years. The universe had a beginning. Okay. This is about, I think, a 10-minute video clip, and it's going to get into a little more detail of the Big Bang, and just ignore the masks that are on some of these people. I don't know why they did that. It's kind of distracting, but anyway.
does something come out of nothing? How do we have a universe that comes out of nothing?
Astronomers believe there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. Scientists are still trying to figure out how all of this arose, seemingly out of nothing.
Well, it turns out if you apply quantum mechanics to gravity, then in fact, space itself becomes dynamical, and universes, spaces themselves, and time can pop into existence where there was none before. So you can create whole universes where there was no universe before. And indeed, in that way, you might imagine creating a universe from literally nothing. Whole universes from literally out of existence. Whole universes out of nothing.
Wait, our universe popped into existence from literally nothing? There is no cause for all of this? So, straight up nothing. No matter, no creator, then poof, the universe? That's actually the story some atheist scientists are peddling right now. Sounds pretty desperate to me. Stephen Meyer, a philosopher of science and best-selling author, explains how atheists got backed into this corner.
It was generally assumed by most physicists prior to the 1920s and 30s that the universe was eternal and therefore self-existent, that it had always been here and really didn't require an explanation. As one physicist said, an infinitely old universe would relieve us of the necessity of explaining the origin of the universe at any finite time in the past.
But then, the idea of an eternal universe was challenged by a pair of surprising discoveries. First, it became clear that almost all the galaxies in the universe are moving away from us. Then it got weirder. 2 guys figured out that generally the farther a galaxy is from us, the faster it's moving away. One was a Belgian physicist and Catholic priest, Georges Lemaitre. The second was American astronomer Edwin Hubble. Drawing on Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity, they then realized that space itself is expanding. Physicist Brian Miller explains why.
Let me use an analogy. If you have a balloon and you imagine putting dots on that balloon to represent galaxies, and then that balloon inflates, what happens is all the dots move away from each other. And dots that are further apart will move away from each other even faster. And that's exactly the sort of evidence we see in our universe.
This discovery suggests that if you reverse time, like a movie running backward, then all the galaxies would draw back together to a single point, which led to a conclusion that some scientists didn't really want to face.
The universe has been expanding from a finite beginning point, where not only matter and energy, but time and space itself began.
Today's scientists call this first moment of the universe the Big Bang.
Starting with the Big Bang.
The Big Bang theory means the universe is not eternal after all. It has a beginning. Even more radical, the Big Bang implies that the cause of the universe must be something non-material.
The Big Bang shows that all of time, matter, space, and energy started at a single moment in the past. Therefore, whatever started it has to be outside of time and space.
You can't posit a materialistic explanation because there's no matter there before the beginning to do the causing.
Many scientists initially resisted the Big Bang, including Einstein, whose theory partly inspired the idea.
He really didn't want at that point in his career to think about the beginning of the universe because he didn't want to think about what would be necessary to explain the origin of the universe if we're talking about all of matter, all of energy, all of space and time.
Einstein eventually accepted the Big Bang theory, but others went on searching for an option that would fit the data without requiring an actual beginning. One that grabbed a lot of attention was the oscillating universe model.
The universe would be expanding outward, but then as the expansion slowed, the matter in the universe, by gravitational force, would cause the universe to recollapse. But once it recollapsed, then by some unknown mechanism, it would expand again. So you'd get a series of big crunches followed by big bounces. That theory ran into 2 big problems. The first was it was discovered that there was not enough matter in the universe to cause the universe to recollapse. And secondly, it was determined by thermodynamic analysis. The energy available to do work would diminish with each successive cycle. It would be kind of like a ball bouncing to the ground and finally it would damp out where there's no more bounces.
He's gonna get it and drop it. Oh, man.
So the oscillating universe model was a big fail. And actually, all the attempts to evade a true cosmic beginning ran into serious problems. The evidence for the Big Bang kept piling on until most scientists accepted it. Some scientists, however, found themselves facing serious doubts, not about science, but about atheism. World-renowned astronomer Robert Jastrow didn't believe in God, but he found it hard to get around what the Big Bang seemed to be telling him.
So there's a beginning, there's a point in time from which it all started. And that's a remarkable thing because it has a very strong theological flavor to it. And that intrigued me because I am an agnostic, and if there was a beginning, a moment of creation in the universe, then there was a creator.
Of course, a lot of scientists still resist going where the science seems to be leading. Take physicist Stephen Hawking. Before his death, he proposed a new argument against the need for a cosmic creator.
Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing.
Now, when I first read that, I was staggered because it's self-contradictory to start with. Because there is a law of gravity, because there is something, the universe can create itself from nothing. That's a flat contradiction. And then to say the universe can create itself, that's logical nonsense. If I say that X creates Y, roughly speaking, I'm saying if you've got X, you may in the end get Y. But if I say X creates X, then that simply proves to me that nonsense remains nonsense even if high-powered scientists say it.
Well, what about physicist Lawrence Krauss and his something from nothing idea?
Imagine creating a universe from literally nothing.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Because how they get a universe from nothing is by redefining nothing.
Krauss's nothing is actually something, a set of laws and mathematical equations. That's the first problem. Meyer explains the second problem.
Krauss's nothing involves the equations of quantum physics. And equations are mathematical entities. And mathematical entities are abstract concepts, always exist in minds. So his nothing seems to imply the need for a pre-existing mind.
A pre-existing mind. Now what does that sound like?
The Big Bang provides very, very strong evidence pointing to God. Because it shows that everything started, all matter, time, space, and energy, at some point in the past, that means that something had to start it. And that something had to be immaterial, timeless, infinitely powerful, and even personal, because only a personal being can choose to act with purpose.
But some people will embrace almost any absurdity to avoid the possibility of God.
You say there are 3 different types of nothing.
That's right.
What are the 3? I didn't know there was such a variety. A sampler platter. You haven't been rubbing any of that baby shampoo in your head, have you? With the THC in it?
Well,
no? You're clean?
No
You're clean?
Yeah.
Give me a haircut.
3 kinds of nothing or 3 kinds of nonsense. If people can convince you that our entire existence comes from nothing, then it's just a short step to believe as a product of nothing, you are nothing. That all the things you see, touch, taste, smell, think, and feel mean nothing because they came from nothing, were caused by nothing, and served nothing. But if you and the universe were created by someone, a grand creative genius, the maker of matter, energy, space, and time, then you were made for a reason. Your existence means something. You are here for a purpose. For those willing to open their eyes, that's the amazing reality science is revealing. We are not materialists. We see the human soul. We experience love. We live with purpose. We fight for justice. We are the quiet majority, and we will be quiet no longer.
Okay, he talked about Robert Jastrow. He was an astronomer and planetary physicist and founding director of NASA's Goddard Institute. And as you saw, he's an agnostic, but he said, you know, if it began, something had to cause it to begin, the universe. He also had this interesting quote, I think is, and I think it refers to the Big Bang theory that came out. He said, for the scientist who's lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. So, and again, he's an agnostic, but I just think that's a really interesting quote.
Is he still living?
No, he died several years back.
Oh.
And one of the co-discoverers of the cosmic background radiation that we saw, that antenna in New Jersey, he said the best data we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, the Bible as a whole. So in summary, on one of the major scientific questions regarding the universe, the Bible was correct. Science sometimes is wrong, and it can take a long time for science to correct itself. And it's okay to doubt and question. It's better if you seek answers. And I truly believe in my long search for answers that if Christianity is really true, there should be strong evidence it's true, and that's what I've found. And I still doubt, but I have answered a lot of my questions. So anyway, that's the presentation. Any questions, comments?
Very well done. I enjoyed it.
Oh, did you? Oh, thank you.
Very educational.
At the time of some of these major discoveries in the late 20s and 30s, was the church, Christian church, growing at that point in time? Do you know?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. Anyone have an answer to that question?
Well, our ancestors, many of them were Presbyterian ministers in big churches, New York, Detroit, and that would have been back in what, the 30s, 40s. And from my upbringing, I always saw the church as a major impact in communities. Everywhere I lived, churches were really, really dominant. Everybody that I knew was going to church. So that's just from my life experience.
Well, as I showed in those graphs, just over the last 20 years, faith has taken a really steep decline in belief in God. So, and I think it's really unfortunate because people don't really search for the answers. They just hear, you know, in our society and those 4 horsemen I talked about and in the colleges, it's just talked and it's just assumed a fact that there's no God. But there is strong scientific evidence that there is a God. And
just as general creation, revelation there is proof enough. I mean, life itself has got to be proof, because for them to say that we evolved from chemicals in a pool of water, we all be the same, because anybody does chemical experience, you get the same results, you get the same thing. You wouldn't have male, female, you wouldn't have birds, bees, flowers. It doesn't come from a pool of chemicals, right? I mean, so that itself is general revelation of God. We have to do a creation, not an accident.
well, I think it's just common sense. If you look at the universe and you know, all the life that we see, it just couldn't have started from nothing. It just, you know, it makes no sense.
Yeah, 2 words come to my mind, which is intelligent design. And that, in my mind, counters any atheistic explanation for, you know, what we see and what we experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just the mystery of life. Evolutionary time frame, it could not have happened even in a long period of time. What we know about the biology of chemistry and life, if there's a random event that somehow caused what we have today, there's simply not enough time, it begs the answer of an intelligent creator. And maybe what you're presenting is kind of going full circle. It's coming back from the steady state.
Well, this is a great book, and I'm going to give it to the church library, and if someone wants to check it out or if you want to buy it, it's called Return of the God Hypothesis, and this is exactly what he says. 3 scientific discoveries that reveal the mind behind the universe. So I think there is a...
Is that Metaxas that wrote that?
No, it's Stephen Meyer.
Stephen Meyer, okay.
So I do think that science, and we're going to get into more science as we go through this. Unfortunately, we missed last... Oh, yes.
I don't think the Big Bang Theory is bogus, because what could have created that beginning of energy and compressed all that energy into just a sphere?
Well, I think that was God.
Exactly. I think the Big Bang Theory is correct. It's just that God started the Big Bang Theory.
I agree. I agree totally.
Yeah. The one thing that someone talked about there was the feeling of love. You know, where if it was just a big bang, you wouldn't have had that. I thought that was a very good point in the presentation.
Exactly.
I have a question. In the time
Well, let's let this young lady over here speak.
That's okay. I just feel like there's just so much to us as people. Like, if we just separate ourselves from everything else that's already created, us as people, the way that our lives run, the way that our minds work, it doesn't make sense that there wasn't something that created that in the first place, because we're just so intricate and we're so delicately woven and made with so many different attributes and things, and we all have different dreams and we all have different aspirations. It's just like, it wouldn't make sense to say that someone else, something greater, made that, because it wouldn't make sense to say that that didn't happen. Sorry.
Yeah.
In God's image.
Yeah, just because it's like, we're also similar, but we're also different. And it's, yeah.
Do you want to teach the next class? Yes.
I just want to say that if people look in the Bible under prophecy and what has happened in the past, and there's so many archaeological discoveries that back up the Bible every day, they're making more and more and more. So I don't know how anybody can.
Well, I hope to have a class on that, archaeological discoveries at Point God. Yes.
I think there's one thing from the Bible that proven true. Some like scientists or something went scuba diving in the Red Sea. They found carriages and Roman carriages and stuff like that from when Moses parted the Red Sea.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw something like that, but I'm not sure that's actually accurate. So there's a lot on the internet you have to really cipher through.
In the time remaining, I'm sorry we lost last week, because it's going to be an important class, and you're doing a great job, by the way. What is your overview in like a guideline for the next classes? What do you...
Well, we unfortunately, several things. I was going to do 3 sessions, and because that's basically what it takes a long time to create these things. I didn't think it would take as long as it had.
From your grandkids.
Exactly. Yeah, it just takes a lot more time, and I still work. We just had a new grandbaby in Nashville. We're going up there a lot, and the other big thing was this classroom. They were going to put us in a smaller classroom, but it sort of outgrew that. And this classroom is reserved starting in February. Pastor David's going to do like a 6-week class. And so I have another talk ready for next week. We're going to switch to evolution. And but after that, I've got one talk that I'm still working on, but we don't have a place to meet unless we did a Sunday afternoon, or if anyone's got any other ideas.
David sent out an email and said he was delaying his whole set of classes by 1 week because of the snow. So my understanding is that he gave you that space.
Oh, he didn't tell me that.
I
So I-
assumed because we put off 1 week on the next class.
Okay, then, I've got to get working on that third class. I have the second one done, so way to put the pressure on me. And then another topic that we're going to delve into next week is something that's baffled philosophers and thinkers all down through the ages, and it is, can God create a burrito so big you can't eat it? Now, I don't know about y'all, but I just think about it. I lay in bed thinking about that, and we're going to try to answer that one too.
The question about the statistics way back about young people and how they say 10%. Well, who are they interviewing to find those statistics? I don't know how. It would depend on where you live. And
Well, the Gallup poll is a pretty prestigious polling outfit, and so they have all these scientific techniques to make sure that they get a broad spectrum. So I would, and reading a lot of things I read, I would say it's true. Yeah.
That describes Gen Z.
Yeah.
By age criteria. But it'd be interesting to follow that same group, and when they get older and they have more life experience and more wisdom, do their attitudes shift like some of the atheist and agnostic scientists that you presented?
Well,
as a group, do they shift as they ponder the
I think that's a good point, and I'm hoping to get a speaker to come. She lives in Atlanta, and she has a podcast, and I can't remember what it is, but she interviews atheists who have become Christians, and they go through their journey. Why did they do this? And I'm hoping I can get her to come up here and do one of our classes. We might have to do that out in the auditorium, because David said we could open it to the whole church or something. So
Lee Strobel has some books that address a lot of what you're referring to. For those that don't know Lee Strobel, he's an investigative reporter. He's very good. He writes very well.
yeah, he wrote this book, The Case for the Creator, The Case for Christ.
He was an atheist before.
Yeah, he was.
And he set out as an investigator to disprove the Bible.
Yep, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
I got into this class by accident. But I think it's very interesting, but just, is the purpose of this class so that we can talk to atheists? Because I feel that our salvation is through faith alone. I mean, you have to make that step. It's spiritual. You can be convicted by the Holy Spirit. You can move. You can feel the presence of God. But there's that step of faith, and maybe I'm just very basic.
Well, no, it is, but I would say it's not blind faith. You can't just say I believe this, and that's some of the doubting I went through. One of the things is the Bible reliable? Can we trust the Bible? So I did a lot of research on that, and so that gives me something to base my faith on. That's my thought on that.
No, I find it very interesting. I just, I felt the power of the Holy Spirit.
Well, yes, I can't argue with that.
In my life, so I'm, and it could only be. I mean, my husband got here, he gives them. He got just like 1, 2, 3, and
Well,
I don't know that there was any kind of special raindrop with special atoms that fell on him or something. I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and I want to go to this class because my granddaughters do not believe in God. So this is giving me a foundation
Well, again, I think if Christianity is true, there's strong evidence out there, and that's what my research has shown me. It's not, we don't have to take it by blind faith. We were taught it, and because that, to me, when you get in life and life goes badly, if it's not based on solid evidence, it may not last.
And so from a purely scientific point of view, like you were saying, I'm sure you probably have heard this before, but scientifically, to prove something is true, then the opposite must be untrue, right?
I think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the evidence, as pointed to, the Big Bang Theory is now considered true.
Yeah.
Right. So, all those who argue that you have to prove that the opposite is true in order for this to say it's not right. So, I mean, from a purely scientific point of view, you can say, okay, this is now true, prove it wrong.
Well, yeah, but most people have not even heard this story of the Big Bang and all this. I mean, have y'all heard of the story of the Big Bang and how it came about and how scientists originally thought the universe was eternal?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Based on his question. So, in all this conversation, I'm sitting here going, okay, Big Bang was actually when God created the earth.
Yeah. Well, the universe.
I mean, the universe, excuse me. So, okay, then what Russ said, so you're suggesting that, say what you said?
Well, for something to be true,
right,
then the opposite must be untrue. So if the Big Bang theory is true, then the opposite, like this oscillating theory, that's got to be false.
Okay.
So.
Yes, okay. I thought all of a sudden there was a Big Bang and Genesis. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
I find it interesting because I think a lot of us as Christians have actually grown up hearing the Big Bang Theory criticized. And I know I have. I've grown up thinking the Big Bang Theory is the belief that atheists have about evolution, but I think it's interesting to hear that the Big Bang Theory it actually confirms the existence of a creator, because I always grew up thinking of the Big Bang Theory as something that atheists believe, and I had no idea that that actually confirms what we know to be true. And even though it doesn't necessarily go into Genesis and like the 6 days of creation and everything like that, it's interesting to hear that the Big Bang Theory does actually prove God, because even though it may not go into detail in like the 6 days of creation, it proves that there was a beginning, which is exactly what Genesis says. And I find that interesting. It actually kind of contradicts what I grew up to believe in the church, which is interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, I think, well, anyway, yes.
Can you elaborate on the Big Bang? Where did that phrase come from?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. That nickname, the Big Bang, was a pejorative term that a scientist served Fred Hoyle, who was a physicist in England. He actually had a show like Carl Sagan did. Anybody remember Carl Sagan here in the U.S. called Cosmos? But he had something over there. And he was one of the scientists who fought this idea.
He was an atheist.
Yes, he was an atheist. And so when he coined the term, and again, it was in a negative sense. He said, "Oh, that's the Big Bang," and again, it was
meant to be derogatory.
Yes, it was meant to be derogatory. It's interesting. At the end of his life, he made this real. Again, he was a very, very strong atheist early on. At the end of his life, and I don't think he became. I'm not sure he ever believed in God or became a Christian. I'm not saying that, but he said something interesting. He said, if you believe that this all just happened randomly, then you would believe that if a tornado went through a scrapyard, it would build a 747. He said, there's something out there that put this all together, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was just a really interesting statement from this atheist at the end of his life.
I think he was agnostic at the end.
Well, maybe he was agnostic at the end.
Yeah, but it's interesting how the term Big Bang has, for most of us, has become more synonymous with Genesis.
Yeah.
It bit him big time.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to, if I can get enough time, send out an email with some more videos on the Big Bang if y'all want to take the time. They're longer than the little 10-minute clip I have, but they go into more detail. And those four atheists, the four horsemen, I've got some debates, video debates where they debate Christians. I'll send those if anyone wants to look at those. But this book, either one of these books are really, really good. This one, there's several chapters I had to skip. It was way over my head. But there's several chapters that are really, really good and is very understandable. So you just kind of have to start reading this one. Here's one I think Stephen Hawking and quantum cosmology. I think I skipped that one. So anyway, any other questions?
Thank you for doing this class, first of all, because, at the end of the day, I feel like I have faith in God, but if I were to go out and fulfill the Great Commission, which is what Jesus called us to do, we are to have those discussions with potential unbelievers, potential atheists, and potential people that are very averse to believing what we know to be true. So being able to educate ourselves and have the ability to explain some of the deeply held beliefs that we have scientifically can help in creating the additional followers of Christ and can save their souls, and at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. And I think that this group, and specifically, being able to look at faith from a scientific point of view can help tremendously with that goal. So if you've ever heard the theory of Bertrand's teapot, of course, the philosophical burden for someone to make the proof of what they're asserting relies on them. And that's an interesting theory that Bertrand Russell came up with, being an atheist of him, being able to explain it helps to be able to encourage those that are vehemently against Christianity to be able to maybe open the door for them. So it's good. I understand faith has a component, but being an educated Christian, I feel, can be more beneficial in some scenarios.
I agree. Any other comments or questions? So next week we're going to dive into the theory of evolution. So I hope you'll join us, and thank y'all for attending.
Thank you. That was really